So welcome back to the channel, guys, for the Cinefilm Factory. So we've got a really special guest come down today, come to visit us. This is Jonathan Lee, and John is going to tell us all about the past and how editing and cutting rooms were back in the day, movie features. But predominantly, John worked in a really cool area of London, Carnaby Street, around there, Soho, Dean Street.
Yeah, Dean Street a lot, yeah.
So I'm going to hand the floor over
Right.
to John.
Yeah.
Fist bumps, John.
Yeah!
That's it.
Okay.
It's all about the film. So yeah, here we go.
I know, I think a big difference today, I mean, everybody, there's so many editors around. Everyone doing it in their bedroom, on YouTube, whatever. Everybody knows how to do it. But in my day, I suppose we were sort of secret, sort of like little wizards working away, and very few people in the world relatively knew how to edit and actually physically did editing because the equipment was very high precision and it was quite rare relatively, so there was no mass producing. Obviously people had little 8mm amateur stuff that they could practice on, which is how I started. But
So I guess what we're talking about is, this isn't editing like we do on modern digital. This is proper film, isn't it? This is like the video that I did with Louis, my 11-year-old son, where he was threading a 16mm projector. We're talking about the real stuff from the 1960s, 70s.
That's it, yeah. So I got interested in it, having been as a kid loving little theatre, model theatres and puppets. Wonderful. And also magic kits. Used to fancy myself as a little magician and all that. So somehow it's a perfect upgrade really. And then I went on to 1/4-inch tape, making my own little radio programmes and little documentaries on tape recorder, 1/4-inch only. Would wander around with the tape recorder on a wheelbarrow with huge extension leads to plug the reel to reel in, no portable, and then be on location doing recording my dad's farm animals and things like that, and interviewing him. That was, say, back in 1968, 67, 68. And then really persuaded my dad to buy me a little second-hand standard 8mm film camera.
Pushing the boat out.
It was a second-hand shop in Jersey, 1969. A little, what they called a Keystone camera. The lens wasn't great. I didn't realise that. But it was called a Keystone. And he wound it up. That was the key. I upgraded to a lovely Russian camera later, one of those Quartz 5s. Oh, the Quartz. The lens was much better, honestly. I learned that later.
Chalk and cheese from what you had.
God, but I started with this, and it wasn't even now the other one was, I learned about single lens reflex, say. Well, I knew it with my stills cameras. I did a lot of still 35mm camera. But a lot of my framing wasn't exactly right because it wasn't what they call single lens reflex. So you went close and you were a bit off from what you really saw on the film.
So let me get this right. So going back, early days, you with the puppets. Yeah. So what we're talking about there is essentially stop frame animation. Yeah.
It was just puppet shows and things before I even did film. But later I did early stop frame animation on that Keystone camera, trying to emulate Terry Gilliam, and the Monty Python crew. What they were doing, and I tried to do my own Monty Python type animation on a rostrum camera, and I did that too.
So for those of our younger audience who are following and watching this YouTube video here, so let me just dive in a second to stop frame animation. So essentially, if you let's take a little stack of paper, pad of paper, and if you drew like a stick man, like so you had the legs and the body and then the arms. And then if you flick that all together, so they flick, you get the movement. Oh, it's me doing my robot bit there. That essentially is basic stop frame animation, isn't it? It's the movement of the still character.
I would do it with little bits of cut, just like in early Monty Pythons and all the Monty Pythons. That Terry was a master of, the American guy, who became a mega film director.
Let's take you back then, 1960.
1969. Okay, yeah. So,
what was it like?
So yeah, leaping on eventually. So I did my own films, worked for a stunt team doing their films on my 8mm camera, and that meant I met they were semi-professional stunt people. So that then I got to meet a couple of people on their days off who were professional, but they were doing films at the weekend with their 16mm cameras. So I started to meet some professional guys, and I met a wonderful man called Alan Lavender, who was a camera operator on Roman Polanski's Macbeth, shooting that at Shepperton Studios at the time in 1971. He was doing special effects photography of the slow motion of the dagger turning around and everything for Roman Polanski. All sorts of specialist close-up animation, special effects photography. One of the camera operators, but on this weekend he was doing an amazing fake mock TV commercial called New Force with Added Violence. We can play that in a minute on the video if you like, or see an excerpt, because there's a point where I was cast and put in it myself, so you can have a little bit of me at the age of 16. Here I am, there with the dark glasses, that bit. But see, it's lovely, isn't it? My first bit of film. I had a 16mm Arriflex pointed at me amongst a crowd. But mostly I was making films of this group, and the real stunt men were all the other guys you see in that bit of clip. And because this lovely man, Alan, he gave me lots of contacts, and he ended up, I rung up one of the people, he said, United Motion Pictures in Fitzroy Square, 16, which was specialist in 16mm. So my first company I went to was UMP, United Motion Pictures. 36, it was in Boston House in the middle of Fitzroy Square, a wonderful Adam designed Georgian building, and we were in the basement there. That's where the company was. A wonderful labyrinth of only 16mm filmmaking. Beautiful. In 1973, everywhere there were 7 cutting rooms with 7 film editors. Wow. I did the job as like a messenger boy, or runner as they say, for about 3 months, and then they said, well, I wanted to be a cameraman eventually. That was my ambition, but there was more chance of being a film editor. Those jobs came up. A trainee assistant film editor, or
that's what they offered. In simple terms, chief dog spotting.
Yes, tea maker. Oh, that's yeah. Where you'll be spending your life rewinding film, basically, or logging the film.
Yeah, wonderful.
But you learned a lot of this stuff. I was there with a film editor for a year and a bit, and then several of us. I worked with several film editors, and this particular film editor said, they've asked me to join Roger Cherrill's. You want to come with me?"
Roger Cherrill.
So Roger Cherrill's was in Dean Street, where Goldcrest is today. And here it is. There's a picture of it here. You can see it. 65 to 66 Dean Street. Lovely Georgian street of Mead Street on the corner. Yeah. And that did 16mm film, but mostly we handled 35mm film, the big stuff. There were feature film directors directing feature films there.
Give us some names.
On the most incredible time, I joined them in September 1974, and the boss of that company was a film director at the time and a film editor. He was one of the a manager below the man himself, who was my true boss, Roger Cherrill, the lovely Mr. Roger Cherrill.
I've heard of Roger.
Who was a legendary film editor. One of the films he edited was Billy Liar, which was the big, incredible late 50s film. Amazing. Or is it early 60s? Early 60s, with Tom Courtenay, written by Keith Waterhouse. And
Stanley Kubrick, did he visit?
That's a nice jump. I never met Stanley Kubrick, but I certainly knew one of his film editors, Martin Hunter, because Martin, I've been kicking myself nearly every day for the past 40 years. Because Martin was my assistant.
Right.
As Jonathan Lee, assisted by Martin Hunter. He went on to be Stanley Kubrick's film editor eventually. And so he just started the first feature film. He cut his teeth. What are you doing, Martin? What are you editing? Full Metal Jacket, he
Oh
said.
my word.
So that was his first movie for Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, wonderful.
Not long after editing this wonderful film on the great American theme park for BBC Science and Features Department called The Risk Business. Very lively, lots of stuff here on Mickey Mouse and Disneyland. But then Martin went off to work with a wonderful, legendary film dubbing editor called Win Ryder.
Nice.
He was his assistant because Win was the always chosen film sound editor for very big film directors, including David Lean. Stanley would always ask for Winston Ryder to do all his sound effects and do all the sound editing and be the main dubbing editor, as they called it, on the 35mm for Stanley.
Yeah.
Up over in Buckinghamshire, in that great big labyrinth of a film studio that Stanley had round his house. Martin went to assist Win Ryder. And so I used to keep in touch and ring him up on what he was doing on the phone, and it was a mystery to me, the title. I could just, this film, I'd never heard the word, it was a single word, and it was evocative, but I just didn't know why on earth it was called that, this film.
Yeah.
And Martin started on it in the very early 1980s, about maybe 1980, 1981, something like that, or 82. Look it up on Wikipedia, quick reference, get the date right. But it was The Shining of all. So I said to Martin, "What are you working at?" He was Canadian, lovely man. He came from Canada originally. Hi, John. I'm working on The Shining with Win over here. We're doing sound. Years later, I kept in touch with him. 5 years later, what are you working on, Martin? I'm still working on The Shining, he said. That's because the film then was getting towards the end and Martin had been on it from the very beginning. But then later Stanley chose him to go around grading and making sure every print all around the world was a perfect Stanley. He was Stanley Kubrick's eyes as far as the laboratory, liaising with the laboratories to get the colour right.
Nice.
on The Shining.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm still working on The Shining, but he ended up just staying on Stanley Kubrick's payroll until the next movie. His reward really was after being such a great lead, was to be given the next big movie that Stanley would say, Martin, I want you to cut for me Full Metal Jacket. But of course Stanley, it was the sort of director who would be very interfering. Martin would be running the film, and Stanley would say, while he was running it on the moviola, "Cut! It's cut, Martin!" And Martin would actually
made me jump then.
Stanley actually acted like he was sort of editing himself. And Martin, the editor, you were put in a position where you had to stub a Chinograph mark at the moment Stanley said cut on a movie. Cut! And he went like that, and he prodded his Chinograph on it, then go home later and cut it in the place he really wanted to cut it, rather where Stanley said. But eventually, that's how you had to work with some film directors were quite meddling, but and were frustrated film editors themselves. Well, Stanley was a master film editor, really, as well as
directing the movie.
You know, so
directing the cutting room by the sound.
Oh
of
yeah,
things.
that's a lot of some directors would be like that. So they'd be rather intimidating. You'd run it and they'd say, "Cut! Fucking stop the film! Cut there!"
Goodness me.
Yes.
Wow. So the equipment you were using the Steinbeck. Was that the go-to?
Doing 35mm TV commercials, which I sort of enjoyed doing. They were like short vignettes, short, sharp shocks of interesting projects to work on. You sort of edited mostly a 30-second or sometimes a 45-second commercial.
Yeah.
And they were lovely, expensive, high budget items, and you'd have a lot of. It was like editing a mini feature film. For instance, like this particular film for Trebor Soft Mints with John Fortune and Prunella Scales. This is one of my favourite that I'd edited because it was like a lot intimate dialogue, rather like a mini feature film. This commercial was sort of based on how many commercials have been based on this brief encounter. So it's at a station, and you see the actors intimately talking next to each other on a bench, and this was like cutting a scene from a little feature film. I felt, and I really enjoyed this. It's one of my favourites. That's why I keep showing it off to people on my phone still.
Yeah, proud moment.
Yeah, there was a particular TV commercial. Rich, creamy bachelors. and the voiceover was Alexis Corner. What a wonderful voice. But we used to use him for voiceovers. But Alexis Corner, I mean, the Rolling Stones might not have existed were it not for Alexis Corner discovering them. He was their sort of informal manager originally and put them together. He was also a great musician. But he had this wonderful gravelly voice. This commercial was amazing because I used very convoluted, strange equipment on it. It was 35mm synchronizer that also had it was synchronized. The machine. Have you got one of these or ever seen one?
No, we don't.
This is a 35mm synchronizer without didn't have a viewer on it, but it was geared on another track to work with. Now I do remember now this machine it was like a pick sync. There's a pick. Well, they called a pick sync, made by Acmade. It had like a normal pick sync 16mm. Here's a version of that if you want to show that. There it is.
Going back to 16mm again, guys.
Yeah,
this is what we're talking about when we talk about 16.
But obviously 35 was about that
was
much wider. But the bigger format, which was feature films were put on it because the frame area was larger, the quality was greater, far greater. Most TV commercials were shot on 35mm film. But this particular commercial, all the product scenes of the soup and the studio work with the lovely, here it is, the sort of soup going into the bowl, 35mm. But all this incredible scenery of around Britain, people in the cold, children falling in the snow and people going shopping. It was really a picture of Britain back in the year 1979,
wow.
Britain in the late 70s.
Wow.
Thirsting for hot soup. Now all these documentary style pieces synchronised to this Tubular Bells-esque.
Mike Oldfield.
It was rather like, it was an imitation, it was inspired by Tubular Bells, Mike Oldfield. It sounds like it rather, but somebody else composed it to give that Tubular Bells type feel because that was so atmospheric back in 1979. And I edited all the documentary footage was on 16mm. This was a multi 16mm. This was several 16mm images had to go together. You'll see them coming down on this commercial, rather like the split screen 3 ways.
Wow.
So you had to synchronize the 3 images, how they would split to the tune of Tubular Bells. So it was going dung 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 dung. Each of those was a cut, and we'd go across, and so you see that, and so that required this incredible piece of equipment with 3 pictures on it.
Amazing.
To synchronise all this stuff together. Anyway, that bit, and that was a bit of an, because then the intimidating thing about something like this is that you're editing it, but you're providing incredibly complex B and C picture rolls. A, B and C film visual picture rolls for another wizard, aside from film editors, if I be bold as called us that, both the women and men who were doing the job at the time. We were working away in our little lairs there. We had to provide guides for people who were doing the big special effects at the time. Now, of course, we'll have all these amazing, you can do it on your own editing system, various digital effects, or you use Avid, you use Flame and Quantel to do incredible effects. But then, of course, the rarely unsung heroes of the time were the film optical houses, the people who had to refilm the film, film the negative basically. That was technically, we took an interpositive from the negative, 16mm, and they'd refilm it to make the effects, to put it all together visually, and that would take lots of expensive filming overnight, and the next day you'd see. And if it went wrong, it was then my fault quite a lot, because I would have guided these people in the wrong way. I was providing guides to show them how that they should place their negative to refilm the film on a rostrum camera. This is what you would do even if you were putting titles on a film, like titles on a feature film, freezing a frame. But this was one of the most complex opticals that I'd ever put together. And I think it's quite an amazing example.
And that brings us to just how hands-on everything was with film back in the day, for the things we see now.
Yeah.
The certain younger generation, they really have no idea, so it's so important.
Yeah.
And another thing I'd like to add, and sorry to interject there because I know John's keen to talk a bit more, but if any of you are visiting London this summer or whenever, I would advise you, and I think John would probably advise as well, just go off the beaten track for a bit. Go and have a wander down Dean Street now.
Yes, all right. So
around Soho.
That's it, because in a way, it's rather like if you've got your own small editing setup at home, or you've got it all there in front of you. You've got your tricks. You can do fades and mix and dissolves and put pictures together, edit everything, all in this incredible digital magnificence. But in those days, we just had to wander down these streets in an analogue way with film cans under our arms, and move from one location where we put the film together. Then I'd go from here, 66 Dean Street on the corner with Mead Street, run down the steps, go almost opposite into it was a road running parallel with Old Compton Street. I've forgotten the name of the street, where Camera, for instance, one of the great optical houses back in the mid 70s onwards, lasting until the late 1980s, was Camera Effects Limited. And here was it was a very high-tech place. It was rather like visiting today one of those amazing video houses, like the Mill, for instance, if you go in there today, or what we used to know as Moving Picture Company. Here, in those days, we'd go to the video houses eventually. We'd still use videotape finally to put our films on 2-inch videotape. They would play a part, and it was in the early days we'd get into that. But the optical houses, they are something a lot of people might have not think about so much. The refilming of the film to do the effects. Yeah. And of course you'd go from one place there, or we go
Film Labs.
And we go to the film labs. There's K's, but mostly with the 35mm feature film world and TV commercials. It would be Rank Film Labs in Denham, or Technicolor, all in Denham area. Technicolor in somewhere else, somewhere in Buckinghamshire. else. But no, Technicolor actually were in Uxbridge, I think. Oh, now I'm getting very confused now. Anyway, there were two labs. The main ones was Rank Film Labs and Technicolor Film Laboratories. There was K Films. They were mostly 16mm Ks. BBC would use them hugely, and BBC would also use Filmatic Laboratories in Gillespie Road.
Gillespie Road. We've the K Film Labs is something that resonates quite highly.
With here,
yeah, because at the Cinefilm Factory we did a full restoration of 16mm film, and interestingly, when we did the can openings years ago now, inside the grandfather had shot his journey. He'd done a flight and quite a tour of the world, and he was doing this, this aero flying, and documented it, his life travelling around. When we opened the cans, the paper was, all systematically in there. K Film Laboratories, London, and you just don't see it.
Yeah, that was they had a, imagine the prices of property now. They were in those days. It was, Soho was quite downtrodden back in the 70s. Still, Soho we were. It was the film business was all here in Dean Street and Wardour Street, and lots of roads linking them in between. The key one was always Wardour Street, really, the most famous film, the Hollywood of London. Well, they wasn't the Hollywood. I mean, the film studios were they were out in like Shepperton, Pinewood, Elstree Film Studios. Just thinking about Shepperton Film Studios, I said that. But then all the putting together. Now, I used to think of film editing back then because it was a bit of a secret thing. Nobody was doing it at home apart from their own 8mm. Of course, amateurs were doing it in their own way, and I'd been a keen amateur 8mm film maker myself at home on the kitchen table back in Horsham area. Yes, I think I used to. The analogy I used to think of when I got involved as a trainee assistant film editor, and then an assistant film editor, and then a film editor eventually, before I became a film producer. That sounds very grand, but I was doing it mostly on television commercials, so it wasn't like as grand maybe as you might think, but it was great fun being a TV commercials producer, working closely with film directors, and we could give you a whole list of those people. But when I first saw these film cutting rooms, which were no larger than this very room of Simon's here, at the Cinefilm Factory, I thought really, especially working on documentaries as I began on, it was all industrial film. We call it corporate TV, corporate videos today. In those days, these films for Shell and Ford, the sort of things I started working on, were industrial filmmaking, basically. And there's a huge market. They're long promotional films for Ford, especially on Ford Rally and all that. That's the sort of thing, rally films. And I met a few amazing rally drivers who came in to do their voiceovers on these things. But I used to think, basically, seeing the film editors, I decided really, maybe to make myself feel better because I didn't become a film cameraman or a trainee assistant film cameraman, what I really wanted to do. I suppose that seemed more glamorous. That was a big upfront thing with a big here's me holding this Arriflex, for instance, and I love that. And I just fancied, and I did a bit of filmmaking. I'd use Bolex and Arriflexes, 60mm. But I used to then maybe console myself by thinking, well, really, actually, that these documentary filmmakers, these film cameramen, are going out doing the shopping, really. They're out but we're the chefs in the kitchen, and the cutting rooms and putting the whole thing together so I felt actually maybe I'm in a better place. It's very creative. We're the chefs.
without spoiling,
Film chefs.
Without spoiling the broth. But do you remember that? Do you remember that client who came down to the studio a few years? That lovely old boy. And do you remember his beautiful old leather case with he had?
Oh yes.
Do you remember?
Yeah,
You took the photos.
yes. Yeah. Well, here they are, the photos. They've got some here now. Looking back at this. What happens now at the cinefilm factory? When I was helping Simon for a few years here, on and off. There's just. And then I would take the photos of this, revisit these amazing scenes and bits of equipment that I actually parted company from for for a number of decades, really.
And hearing the stories of clients as well coming in, because everybody who comes through our door, wonderful clients, everybody. The one thing I learned, everybody has a story.
Yeah, and don't they? So many had recorded either they've edited and done things, or they might have just simply shot film and it's never been fiddled with, which was great because the quality would be probably better because it was never edited. And so many people will round the country got them in their lofts and maybe getting round to
dig them out.
Yeah,
get them done.
To getting them transferred onto flash drives now maybe, and then there was DVDs if you wanted to still do it that way. But there's so much. I wonder how many feet of film lying around, say, in the UK.
That's the eternal question.
That still have not yet seen a piece of equipment to transfer it digitally, because we're all looking at photographs all the time, but there's lots of film. That's your mission.
It's a mission. It's been the mission for many years now. But one of the things, just going back, talking about Dean Street. Obviously, we've heard the wonderful things here that John's contributed today, from his experiences and the sights, the sounds, the smells of the swinging 60s of the London and Carnaby Street, Soho, everything that went on. But do you know what I just find mesmerising? One thing that I find absolutely fascinates me about hearing about John is the legacy of it. Now, some of what you've spoken about there, you may or may not know. John has a son. His son is a YouTuber, digital age, Caspar. So he's already made his digital content creation, etc. So some of your experience as Caspar as a young boy must have filtered down. He must have heard you, seen you cutting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I once I became in the late 80s, early 90s, once I started working as a TV producer of some television material, like this particular one on the Viking invasion of Ireland. Yeah, we shot that on video, back in 1988. Yeah, on location in Denmark, Saxony, a little piece of southern Germany, Denmark, mostly. But mostly, though, I was working on television commercials still. Then again, but then at home, having the young children, my daughter Theodora in 1991, and then Caspar was born in 1994. Yeah,
a wee spring chicken still.
Yes, so but as soon as Theodora was born, I purchased it was probably then again a technique. It's rare in itself now. Here it is a Sony film camera, Video 8 with these little cassettes. But mine, what they used to say, high 8. Yeah. I think that would be. This was what you called low 8, I suppose. Always started on the low end, but they were wonderful, affordable things. High 8 was almost broadcast quality, but everywhere was selling these amazing Sony film video cameras. So I recorded lots of these scenes of them growing up.
Like most people.
On that, wonderful, compared with the days of having to do 8mm films, sending the 8mm film off to Box 13, Hemel Hempstead, and waiting for Kodak to send it back again weeks later and looking at it.
New video.
But in another video, the Kodak day, I mean, the thrill of getting your rushes back in your little yellow packets here from Kodak. I used to think, wow, Kodak. And actually, Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you'll show that later. You can cut to that.
Yeah, I got. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, there we are. These. I mean, that's the thrill of getting that back from Hemel Hempstead.
In the envelope, and I've done videos on those before, guys. Those on the channel will have seen.
Yeah. Lovely, there it is, and you're showing all that.
The yellow packets. You know that we're not. I don't want to triangulate away from what the wonderful things we're talking about, but the Kodak at Hemel Hempstead, we're going to do a road trip with Alan, and we're going to go up because it's now luxury flats.
Oh, wow.
But that's going to be another video. I'm going to stick to that one. But going back, so when the kids were growing up, you were cutting on.
Well, yeah, I think that.
Did they interested?
No, yeah, I wasn't really then, but growing up, you know what they grew up with was me taking Video 8 Sony Video 8 videos of them, recording them, and then sometimes we would make little films together. We'd actually fiddle around like cutting the camera rather than do the I'd do little films, and we'd end up editing in the camera type stuff, because I didn't bother much with editing my home movies, but I certainly did a lot of short takes and stopped the interminable long takes. So we put them in these little films together and made little dramas, rather like going back to my childhood with the 8mm. So they got used to performing, rather like my brother was used as an actor who became a rather distinguished lawyer eventually. But this thing called Kit on Camera, shot in 1971. That's me filming him and making a little TV show of him, Christopher Lee, Kit Lee as we called him. So this is Kit on Camera. How we go to cut years later, making film videos, putting my own children in them, and then before long they asked to have the camera. Give me the camera, Dad, very quickly when they're very young, and they would run with the camera and make their videos on. And they'd be shooting, get used to always having a Sony Video 8. Often they wouldn't be picking stills cameras up very often, but they'd always have Dad my own Sony Video 8 camera, and I just let them and run with the videos and encourage them to do it, and that seamlessly dissolved into them making YouTube videos when they were at school. And my daughter was quite a well-known YouTuber herself, and with hundreds of thousands of followers. Theodora Lee.
But she's an author as well.
She's an author now, and a film and an advertising creative director.
Well, they're competitive, Theodora.
But Caspar had his own way of doing it. More, it seemed more laid back the way he did it. Theodora was more known on YouTube as more as an agony aunt, advising people about, which is probably, advising youth of her own age, 18, 19, 20 years old. People were, she got quite famous for doing that. But Caspar started building up Theodora's type of ratings pretty quickly, a few 100,000, and then unlike Theodora, he attained an audience of his first million followers.
Amazing.
By the time in about 2011.
Amazing.
And then was immediately cast in his first feature film, acting alongside Troye Sivan and John Cleese here, who played the headmaster. And Caspar went almost straight from his school into acting in a school uniform in a sort of Tom Brown School Days-esque modern South African production called Spud, the series, and he was in Spud 3.
Amazing. So when you watch,
that was his first feature film.
When you watch Caspar on YouTube, you're right, picking up on what you were saying there. Caspar has his own way of making his YouTube content. He's very, very relaxed, isn't he? Very natural.
Probably because being brought up in South Africa, I started working out there as a television producer in the late 90s. So Caspar was there from the age of 2. He he came, but obviously the family moved there, and he really, actually, although he was born in Paddington, London, he is an honorary South African because he was really lived and spent all his childhood up until the age of about 17 in South Africa, mostly.
Yeah, and the rest is history then, of course. I mean, your legacy, what you've done, you know, and what projects you've been involved with. It's so lovely to hear that's filtered through to your children and the wonderful things that they've gone on, you know, to achieve and do. I love it. That's very
gratifying. Yeah,
it really is.
It really is. I'm very fortunate. Yeah.
To digital.
Yeah.
And I love the way it comes. The whole thing comes together with that. I really do. And just as we start to wrap things up here, so I mean, obviously John's, you know, spoken about his legacy and his involvement in you know, in Soho in London then, but today, if, as I say previously, you know, if you go and have a wander, a lot of content creators have taken up residence in some of the old analogue buildings there now. So they're running content, you know, YouTube channels.
Yes, and some of that. That's right. Well, even Caspar has gone on to be quite an entrepreneur today, and so one of his companies does run from in Great Marlborough Street, influencer.com. is a major influencer-led advertising and marketing agency.
So be sure to check
and there it is in headquartered in Great Marlborough Street, which is obviously. And before that very company was in Dean Street for a while, in the very building where they used to sell a lot of these projectors and.
I wonder if my shoulder. While you're talking, I'm going to hold one of it. See if we can get that one on. I'm going to hold it up. I've got a bad shoulder at the moment. But let's put that
beautiful.
Up. It's the Siemens 2000H, the BBC cast. Wonderful, wonderful pieces of kit, German engineering. And the BBC asked Siemens to put these together for them, and they're just beautiful, beautiful machines. But well, that about wraps it up for today, guys. Hopefully you found this interesting, all this information. I think John and I are going to get together. We are definitely, just from talking, we've got so much more content to release. We're going to do the Kodak at Hemel Hempstead. I think the three boys will go and do a road trip up there. Me, Alan, and John will go up and do that, and that will be really, really interesting.
Yeah,
we could talk a bit more.
Amazing, because I never actually went there. I don't think or maybe I went there once to pick up this film that I'd made called Mickey. I think we actually, this particular film was I edited at home in 19. Oh God! I won't go anymore. That's it.
But that's fine.
We can't say anymore. That's
absolutely
that's for
fine.
Another video.
But Kodak, I'm willing.
Yeah, because I'd love to. I think I went there once, but it was like I used to get a thrill seeing the BBC Television Centre and get them popping in there years ago when my ambition was originally to work at the BBC. But wow! But actually, some of these labs, the very first lab I was acquainted with was Kodak.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm sporting the Kodak T-shirt today, not the normal cinefilm fact. John's fashioning that for us today, looking absolutely wonderful in that. So thank you very much. That's John's top. That's it. Right up. So, and I'm going to put a link down, because another thing that John touched upon was the High 8, the Video 8 and the Digital 8. They're not getting any better, guys. I made this video 6 years ago, all about that. Link in the description on that. And that's the Video 8, the High 8 and the Digital 8. They're literally starting to emulsify, but you can watch the video on that. So it's a big thank you to John today. For his collaboration and to hear everything. It's so important to hear these things and preserve it on film. As always, comments, vitally important to the channel for you guys to engage. If you've got any questions, we'll put them straight away to John. So if you've got any questions about anything we've spoken about today, then comments in the description down below. Going to give a big shout out to the lovely Rachel from Shake It Up It's absolutely wonderful. She's in the background, she'll be taking photos, she's looking after all our content. So Shake It Up Creative, feel free to check her out. She's been looking after our channel lately, doing an excellent job. So it's a sign out from Si at the Cinefilm Factory for today, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. What that will be, we'll be announcing that soon on all the social media channels. So yeah, be safe, peace out, and thanks for watching the Cinefilm Factory.